Hey everyone, we are back for episode number 2 of Women Who Do, a series dedicated to inspiring conversations with the women who are making a difference. For those of you who may have missed us last week, I'm Jessie Gray Rubenstein and I'm Anne Klein's granddaughter. As you guys know, Anne was a pioneer that continues to stand for strength and empowerment. And through these times of uncertainty, her message is more relevant than ever before. We are introducing the Women Who Do series to highlight those at the forefront of change. Like my grandmother, these women are spearheading stimulating conversations that are inspiring both in these current times and as we begin to rebuild. So, through June 10th, we will be highlighting conversations on career and community as we could all use a little connectivity right now. So I am so thrilled to introduce today's guest, Dr. Laurie Santos. She's a Yale professor, TED speaker, and the host of the Happiness Lab. So Laurie, your class, Psychology in the Good Life, is the most popular course ever offered at Yale. So for everyone out there listening, can you tell me about the topics you're covering on the Happiness Lab and in your course at Yale?
Yeah, well, the class at Yale really started when I took on a new role at Yale. I've been teaching here for over a decade, but just in the last couple years, I became a head of college, which Yale's kind of one of these weird schools like Hogwarts and Harry Potter, where there's like colleges with like the Gryffindor, Slytherin. But I'm head of Silliman College, which means I live on campus with students, and it was in that capacity that I started to see that college student life is not what I remember. College students are way more depressed and anxious and overwhelmed than I remember being. And so the class was my attempt to teach students everything that the science of psychology said about how to live a little bit better, how to be happier and flourish a little bit more. And I didn't expect the response to be as viral as it was. I expected about 40 students to take the class, but the first time the class was taught, it was over 1,000 students showed up to try to take the class. We ended up having to teach the class in a concert hall, which was a little surreal, but it showed me that people, these students and people in general, really want these tips that come from science about how to feel happier. Like, it's not just college students. Lots of us are feeling like we're putting in tons of work and we're like throwing in lots of energy, but we're kind of burning out, or like something's missing. Like there's this disconnect between how much work we're putting in and what we're really getting out of our well-being. And I think a scientific approach can really help. And so the podcast is just kind of a like more narrative version of a lot of the things we teach in the class, where we go through these misconceptions about how our mind thinks about happiness, these motivations we have where we think, if I do X, Y, and Z, that will make me happier, that will make me feel like I'm flourishing. But in practice, our minds are just wrong. And that means we miss out on opportunities to engage with things in our lives that really could make us happier, that could improve our well-being. We kind of just don't realize what would work well.
hmm Yeah, I mean, I think like especially through COVID, you talk a lot about what it means to be happy and what are like some of those, misconceptions about happiness, and what does it really mean to be happy? Can you share a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I think we're seeing these misconceptions writ large in in the time of COVID, in part because our normal routines are so disrupted. We're seeing things that we were taking for granted all the time that are so meaningful for happiness. Things like social connection, things like the ability to like be around the other people that we care about, right? We're realizing that sometimes maybe that's more important than some of the things we were doing at work. We're not necessarily missing the work parts as much as we're missing the connection parts. But we also see lots of other things that matter for happiness much more than we expect too. So the simple act of doing something nice for someone else. We often think that when we're feeling burnt out, when we kind of go into self-care mode, treat myself, right? The heck with other people. But actually the data
Yeah.
suggests that, we might be better off kind of focusing on other people, that becoming a little other oriented can have a protective effect when things are really feeling stressful, which is again not something we expect, what the data show. A final thing I think we're realizing, again, in the context of COVID-19, that's really powerful is the simple act of taking time to experience gratitude. If you're like me, you're realizing there were so many things that you should have been incredibly grateful for before this crisis that you were taking for
hmm
granted. A latte at the local coffee shop, or being able to go to brunch with a bunch of friends when you're having a bad day. Like I wasn't gleefully joyful when I got to do those things before this crisis, and now I'm realizing like how could I not have been so grateful before? And so I think this crisis is causing us to realize what happiness researchers have known for a long time, which is that counting your blessings, noticing the things that are giving you pleasure, like taking active steps to recognize and be thankful while you have them can be a powerful boost to our well-being. And I think some of them are, we're seeing that now. Obviously there are less things to be grateful now in the context of this crisis, but still these true blessings. Some of us are still healthy. Some of us still have our jobs. Some of us have family members who are doing okay in the midst of this crisis. And I think we're all realizing that that too wasn't something that was set in stone. Like we were maybe taking those things for granted too. And so I think we're ending up feeling a lot more grateful for a lot of the little things. And the research shows that that will bump up our happiness more than we expect.
Totally. I mean, I don't think I will ever cancel another Friday night dinner with my girlfriend.
Exactly, exactly. Or just,
um,
the simple act of, just silly things like walking into the grocery store without a mask on. Like, again,
mhm.
these we're just realizing they weren't givens in life. And so what are all the other not givens in life that we're taking for granted now and not understanding how important they are?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, going back to the supermarket, I feel like even when you do go outside and you have your mask on, you normally would give a smile to somebody, but they can't. It's always that moment where they can't actually see your smile, and you're like, smile with your eyes.
And you're trying to do it, like, really big, but your mask is falling off. Yeah, no, I think, it's all these things, but I think one thing to realize even with the social connection part of it, on the street, it gets harder with with masks and things like that, but we also need to be grateful that, this isn't the 1918 flu where, if we
100%.
had to shelter in place, we're sheltering in place, like, just the technology we're using to chat and connect with each other, to chat and connect with the people who are watching. There's lots of ways that we can use technologies and just get a little creative about how to achieve that social connection, even in a time of social distancing. So we're kind of not as trapped as we potentially could be because we have these wonderful technologies that can help us.
No, that's great. And I know I heard you on your podcast talking about doing like a spa night with your girlfriends over Zoom, and I just did like a yoga class over the weekend with my one of my friends over Zoom, and I'm like, we should do this all the time. Like we could always be connected, and we really don't use this amazing technology that's at our fingertips.
And that's really one of my hopes. One of the striking things is that loneliness, especially among young people, has been increasing. And in some ways, and among college students, it's been skyrocketing. And I think that can feel kind of like a disconnect with the technologies we have, right? Like we have a way to connect with literally anybody in the world in any time zone immediately in real time with video. And I think a lot of us weren't making use of those technologies. We just weren't using them. So I hope my college roommate spa night will keep going. Once this is over, I don't want to see them, every 10 years at a reunion. I want to see them, maybe once a week or once a month or something. And we can do that.
100%. So this kind of falls back into, our time, how we use time. And you talk a lot about how our value of time impacts our happiness. Could you share a little bit more on that since our schedules right now are so out of sync and kind of turned on their head? How can we kind of shift our value so we can be happier humans?
Yeah, this is actually something that we're covering in our podcast just this week. So, if you're watching this live, check out the Happiness Lab for an episode called For Whom the Alarm Clock Tolls. And it's a really personal episode for me because, I'm doing this podcast, like being a professor, and I was just feeling really burnt out. And I came to realize that what I wasn't protecting was my time. There's lots of research in the field of positive psychology on this concept of what's called time affluence, feeling wealthy in time, like this subjective sense that you have some time to do all these kinds of things. And the research shows that having this subjective sense of time affluence makes you feel happier, but it also makes you a better person, right? Like it makes you the kind of person who feels like you have the bandwidth to reach out to a friend or to do something greener because you have a little bit of extra time on your hands. And I think this crisis is changing our sense of time in a variety of ways. Some people might feel like they have extra time, maybe they're not commuting to work or things are a little different. I think for those with kids who are doing the babysitting and the schooling and the parenting and the working in the same place, maybe you're feeling much more of the opposite of time affluence, which is what's called time famine. But what the research shows is that the great thing about the research is that it's not your objective amount of time that affects your happiness, it's the subjective sense, right? And we can do a lot to kind of change that subjective sense around. Like, what can you do to give yourself 5 minutes of uninterrupted time? What the research shows is it doesn't have to be a lot, it just has to be yours. And you have to be very intentional about it to make it kind of feel like you have more time. Another tip that comes from the research is to try to positively use what researchers have called time confetti, which are the
Mm.
little snippets of time that we have all over the place. One striking thing from the science is that the science actually suggests that we have more free time on average than we used to, even like, 10, 20 years ago, which is kind of striking because for me personally, it feels like, how could that possibly be true?
Yeah,
Like, I
I
definitely
agree.
feel like I have less time. But the reason you feel like you have less time is this time confetti. We have more time, but it's chopped up into these tiny pieces. And so, what can you do to actually harness that time confetti? In the episode, I talked to a Harvard researcher, Ashley Willens, and she says that she has in her date book and on her phone what she calls a time windfall list. So anytime you get that, like, quick 10 minutes here and there, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to just like check email? Like, that's always going to be there. Are you going to, quickly text a friend, or, look at something inspirational, or just do, three really deep breaths? Like, how we spend those little moments of time confetti can mean the difference of feeling totally burnt out and time famished, and feeling like we have a little bit of a sense that we could do a little bit more with the time we have.
Definitely. It sounds like it's all about taking ownership of your schedule and being very mindful and purposeful as you go about your day.
Exactly. And I think there's lots of tiny techniques we can use right now during COVID-19 to do that. One is that the mind really kind of connects time and space. We really kind of get into a routine. Like if you drive to an office and work there, it just makes it easier to work because you're in the space that your mind associates with that. I think one of the struggles right now is that we're all, working from home, doing family stuff from home. A really simple hack you can do is just like, if you have a big enough space, find a tiny spot that you do your work that's different than when you do your family life. Like
Mm,
literally a different chair, or even if you have one table at the dining room, a different spot on the table, like shift around. It sounds so silly, but it just gives your mind a cue that, like, okay, I'm in work headspace now, or I'm in family headspace now. I'm not going to think about work anymore. And so those are just some little hacks you can use, even in a tiny space, even when things feel frantic, to kind of free up a little mental space so it feels a little easier.
and, I know a lot of listeners out there are super busy. So, do you have any tips if we were just talking about managing your schedule? What are a few ways we can always make sure that we're fitting in, a few ways that we can just improve our mental health?
Yeah, well, one of the hardest ones, and this is one I struggle with myself, but one of the most powerful ones, but hardest ones, is just to do less. I think all of
Mm,
us,
mhm.
inherited like the history of the Industrial Revolution and a generation that said, more, 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 like break through that glass ceiling, like, yes, yes, yes. But actually, the science suggests that saying yes to all these things means saying no to a lot of the things that really matter. It means saying no to balance. It often means saying no to our family and the people we care about. One of the reasons people claim they don't have time to spend with the people they care about is that they're doing all these things for work. What would it look like to scale that back 5%? Or what would it look like to once a week say no to at least one meeting, or at least one Zoom event that you're going to? Like, can you build yourself back that time? Often, the people who are destroying our time and destroying our schedules and burning ourselves out are us. We're the culprit when we look at it. But that means we also have control to do a little bit better. We just need to give ourselves permission and to give ourselves a little self compassion. I think that's an emotion that, if you wanted to kind of work on something over this COVID-19 crisis, working on increasing your own self compassion can be a powerful way to protect burnout in all
Mm,
kinds of contexts during this crisis and then beyond too.
amazing. And for a gratitude journal, can you talk about what a gratitude journal is? When should we be writing in it? Can you please share a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about, gratitude can be an incredibly powerful emotion, but unless we are intentional and take time to really do it, like we often forget. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm supposed to do that important thing for myself. But a gratitude journal is just a physical space where you scribble down 3 to 5 things a day that you're grateful for. You can do it privately and write it down. You can make this a social public ceremony that you do in your house. If you're a family that gets dinner together, go around the table ahead of time and each person say 1 or 2 things they're grateful for. The quick act of doing that, the research suggests, in about 2 weeks can start to significantly improve your well being just through the act of taking time to experience gratitude.
I've actually been, my fiance and I, we've been, even in the last 2 weeks, and really because we've been listening to your podcast so much,
Okay.
is we've been sitting around at the table. We either do this in the morning on the weekends or at the end of the day at dinner on the weekdays. And we'll just share like 3 things that happened today that we're grateful for. And it is really amazing. You just automatically feel this mood boost, and whatever you were worrying about before, it kind of floats away.
And it kind of just trains your brain in a habit. Like, evolutionarily, we have minds that are built to like seek out the tigers. Like, where's the horrible things that are about to happen? And in our modern world, whether that's, polarized politics or this virus, like, it's really easy to find all the negative stuff. So, taking a little bit of work to retrain your brain to notice the positive things. When you hear your fiance say them, you're like, oh, yeah, I too noticed. Like, I'm so happy that I have my favorite tea in the cupboard, or, just X, Y, and Z. Like, you just come up with these things that feel good, but not only does that help you in the moment, it kind of trains your brain to be more able to notice that stuff in the future too.
Definitely. And right now, I mean, we're just so inundated with negative information and just, scary news, frankly. So, do you see any silver lining to everything that's going on right now?
Yeah, I see lots of them, honestly, even in the context of some of the fear that's going on. I think, sometimes when we see a lot of things that are scary in the world, we kind of just ignore it. We sort of run from our things that we really need to feel as a person. And it feels sucky at the time, but learning to be okay with our emotions and accept them, that can be really powerful. But I think a second way that we can kind of use this crisis well is to realize that once we get out of this, there are so many things that we're going to find joyful when we get out. All those things that we were taking for granted before, we might not do that in the future. And then finally, I think there's lots of domains where we can use this crisis as what scientists call a fresh start. There are these moments like a new year, or if you have like a big birthday, when you turn 40 or something, or 30, like you have this fresh moment where things feel really fresh and you can start new habits. Like, this crisis is awful, but it's also a transformative moment where we can start to put those habits into effect. If this is the time you want to start that Zoom yoga class with a friend every week, this is the time to do it. If this is the time you want to start having a gratitude moment before dinner with your family, it's a good time to do it because everything's so different. And so we can use this strange, awful time to harness habits that are a little bit more positive. But the key there, I think, is to do that in baby steps, especially this
Mhm.
crowd, all the fans of Anne Klein, like, they're very intense type A people. And I think another thing we need to realize is like, this is not the time that you're going to start necessarily training for a marathon or be the perfect parents or the perfect workers or the perfect, happiness like seeking person. Like, we need a
Yeah.
little self compassion. So, all these tips that I'm mentioning, baby steps, you don't have to do them all tonight, but if you can squeeze a tiny one in, for 30 seconds, one thing you're grateful for a day, that can be really powerful.
Amazing. And Lori, this is the Women Who Do series. So, a critical question I have to ask you, who are some of the women who have inspired you throughout your personal and professional career?
Yeah, I mean, so too many to list, but definitely my mom and my godmother. My godmother, especially, someone who has just such a love for life and just a love for learning, and I try to emulate that every day. Professionally, so many amazing happiness researchers who are doing such cool stuff. People like Liz Dunn, Ashley Willens. There's just so many scholars who are doing amazing, amazing stuff that I quote all the time, who just are just changing the world with their empirical approach to happiness. So all those folks are folks I emulate, and probably way more than I'm forgetting now in this live broadcast. But
Yeah, I mean, I feel like especially right now, there's so many women who, have just completely shaped this amazing voice during this time to help people that are struggling or, need a helping hand.
yeah, and just
There's
also
always
just
people
people
adding
I
to the
know.
list.
Yeah, totally. And also just like the unsung heroes, friends of mine who are doctors, who are
Mhm.
first responders, or even just caretakers. I have a close friend from high school who works at a nursing home, and my God, the bravery to still keep doing that. So I am
Yeah,
continually inspired by women, from the, famous ones to the unsung ones. And I think it's awesome that we can be able to herald them on an event like this.
I couldn't agree more. So I have been seeing a ton of amazing questions and comments coming through on our chat. Um, okay, let's see here. So Madeline Prawn, she says, I've been practicing gratitude every morning. She's been writing down 5 things she's grateful for first thing in the morning, and she's found that it's really helped. What other ways do you recommend to be more grateful and to starve off anxiety by trying to be in the present?
Yeah, I think another one, if you're already doing that gratitude journaling or that moment, great. I think you can up the ante on your gratitude by starting to express it to other people. My guess is if you look through your big list of things you're grateful for, often that will include other people, but we tend not to express it to other people. But the
Mhm.
sincere act of expressing gratitude can be incredibly powerful. It can be powerful for performance, job and teams who do this in employment situations, like expressing gratitude to team members, especially if you're a leader can increase productivity by 1.5 times, some research
Wow.
suggests. But it's also just great because it makes you personally feel good. There's a study by Marty Seligman and his colleagues where he has people do what's called a gratitude visit, where you like say, "Hey, I want to chat with you." You know, do it over Zoom nowadays, and you say, "I just want to take a moment to express how grateful I am. I wrote this letter and I want to read it to you." You know, it sounds kind of a little cheesy and emo, but actually, the subjects who do this end up having their gratitude not just boosted, but boosted for an entire month, which is really striking. So, don't, if you're already good at gratitude and you're already feeling the emotion, try expressing the emotion a little bit more. Your instinct is that it might feel cheesy and awkward, but actually, the data suggest it can be really powerful.
Definitely. And would you recommend doing that? Is like a text to a friend okay? Or would you suggest doing this like face to face?
I mean, the data suggests that face to face, at least, in real time, like on a Zoom window, is best. But, anyone
Mhm.
who have the opportunity to do it, now in my little mini time windfalls, if it's a couple minutes, I'll pull out a text and just say, hey, thinking about you, or hey, thinking about, I just thought of this funny memory that we had together, and like that moment, if someone sent you that, it would just brighten your day, right? That just other people are thinking about you. And so we forget that we really have the power to shape other people's lives through expressing these things. We don't do it nearly as often as we should.
No, it's so true. Actually, even yesterday, I had a childhood friend send me this photo of us together when we were like 6 years old, and it just completely made my day.
Yeah, and so we forget that we have that power to do that to others, but also that the act of doing that to others can boost our well-being too. It's this completely free tool we have for bumping up our happiness. We don't have to buy anything, like we don't have to like, put in a lot of work. It's a 30-second thing that we can do to bump up someone's day and our own.
Yeah, I mean, they say the best things in life are free.
That's true, that's true, and especially in the context of COVID, I think, where so many of us are facing economic hardships or know people that are, I think the more we can do to bump up our well-being in a way that's not necessarily expensive, it can be really powerful.
Definitely. Well, Lori, thank you so much for joining us today. I will be trying out all of your tips tonight. And for everybody that's out there listening, we would love to hear from you once you've had a chance to put Lori's suggestions into practice. So please drop a note on our Facebook or DM us on Instagram. We would love to get your feedback. And also, a reminder, please make sure to tune in next week at 12 p.m. We will be going live with American actor, activist, humanitarian, and native New Yorker Ilfanesh Hedera. So thank you guys so much for listening. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week for episode 3 of Women Who Do. Lori, thank you again. This has been truly amazing.
Thanks so much, Desi, and thanks to everyone who's made such cool comments. I've been watching them go through, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys. Take care.
Bye.